Every now and again, you meet this rare bird, this person who makes you think, who makes you reflect, who causes you to doubt, but at the same time helps you reconnect to your purpose. A person who inspires and encourages you to stay true to yourself all at the same time. This is what happened to me when I met Kate Shepard. I think you're going to love her story. And when we're done, I think you might understand more about why it's important to tap into your own creativity. But more importantly, I think you'll understand why everyone has it, this thing called creativity, and why it's so good to tap into it. So now, let's move on to my interview with Kate Shepard. Welcome to Decorate Like a Design Boss, a podcast for design lovers who want to create beautiful spaces in their very own homes. My name is Kimberly Grigg, and I'm a professional interior designer who teaches design lovers like yourselves how to decorate. And when I say decorate, I mean decorate like a design boss. If you're ready to create a space that your family loves and your neighbors can't stop raving about, well, buckle up, honey, because it's time to design. So, Kate Shepard is an artist. She's the host of the Creative Genius podcast, and she's the lead designer at Morning Moon Nature Jewelry. And before I welcome Kate, I can't wait to actually read her bio for you, because when I received her bio, I was already in love with her, but now it just went to a whole nother level. And you're going to find that this gal is sweet and authentic and just a real creative genius. And so Kate says, I spent my whole life busily and successfully manifesting all the things: money, a great jewelry brand, an expensive home in a big city, and still there was something missing. And it wasn't material. I realized that at the deepest level, she says, of my being, I wanted to be in service to something, but I didn't know what. She continues, as a lifelong artist, creativity has been my greatest friend and constant companion. The one thing that has never left me. It has walked beside me through some very dark times and always led me back into the light. One day, I realized that not everyone has this relationship with the creativity that lives inside of all of us. And then it hit me that this is why humanity is glitching. And I knew at this moment that this would be my calling. It all fell into place. I know from my own life that a healthy relationship with creativity is as important as breathing or thinking. I know that when we activate creativity, we access deep wisdom and intelligence that has the power to help us build the lives of our dreams. And I also know that collectively we suppress creativity because we have come to believe that these limiting beliefs, which is causing us to glitch. So she says, I am on a mission to challenge these beliefs out loud in the mainstream so that I can help as many people as I possibly can remember what creativity really is, and that it is inside each and every one of us. The Creative Genius podcast is 100% devoted to the emergence of creativity in you. It is a love letter to everyone who has ever wished they could be more creative, but believed they couldn't. Because that wish is creativity itself asking to be set free. Okay, I feel like that I have just given a beautiful commencement speech or something just on your bio, Kate. So I gotta say, welcome, welcome, welcome. Wow, I don't know how you pinned that, but I do know because I listened to your podcast how authentic you are to what you just provided me in a bio. So, kind of like, let's start at the beginning and tell me a little about your creative journey.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for reading that to me because I mean, I wrote that from my heart and it's so beautiful to hear it brought to life because
Oh,
it really is. So it's just this whole truth of my being is in that, what you just wrote. I've been a creative person since really I can remember, like being a really tiny, I mean, I've had art supplies around me since I was a kid, and I've just always wanted to make things and create things. And I actually can't think back to a time when that wasn't a part of me.
yeah.
Yeah, and I went, and then as I grew up, I went to art school and then studied jewelry design in college, and then ended up having a professional career as a jeweler and designer for 10 years. And all the while in the background, we were talking in our pre-show in the chat just about our own homes and how as creatives there's it's everywhere. It isn't just jewelry or painting, it's basket weaving and soap making and baking. And there's something about my being that really loves the experience of making things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really is just a huge part of who I am.
And don't you think, I mean, I do. It's so interwoven. Like it just, we'll get into this in process, but I find that if you allow your creative spirit to play, then it plays across a lot of fields. Does it for you? It
Oh,
obviously it does for you.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, one of the things that we talk about in the show a lot are how we've sort of created this really narrow definition around creativity. And I
Mm,
think that definition that we have, I mean, it's said in a nutshell, it's like it belongs in the visual arts and it's for certain people who are like artists when they're born.
yeah.
And then what you make has to look a certain way. And so for the average person who maybe didn't have that entry into life with creativity being the context, it can be really intimidating to want to let yourself play because it feels
Sure.
like there are so many rules, right, with creativity.
Sure.
And part of
Sure.
that, I think, is we have a really narrow definition of what creativity is, right?
Mm.
And so, I mean, we can talk about that if you want, but I think
Yeah. So, yeah, what is what is creativity? That's a great question. That's very elusive.
it is very elusive. And yeah, I had to sort of think about that because all my life people kept saying to me, "Oh, you're so creative. You're so creative." And I was always like, really? Like, I
Isn't
actually,
everybody?
isn't everybody? And so when I really, I spent a lot of time examining that. What is creativity? And what I've come to is that creativity seems to be the energy that's animating the entire universe.
Mm,
So the
mm,
intelligence that's inside of you that knows how to breathe your body, you're breathing, you're doing all kinds of things right now, and you're not even
right.
thinking about it. You don't have to.
Right.
There's and there's that same intelligence that's telling a little dandelion in my driveway how to poke up through the crack in the
Yeah.
driveway. And it's that same energy that when you're in your studio in front of your canvas, if you're playing and you're free and you're allowing it, it's the thing that moves your hand and tells you where to go or what color to choose.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
if you're a poet, what words to come out. Like it's that
Sure.
there's an energy. There's an energy that we can tap
There,
into.
that is so beautifully put, Kate, because so many times people will say to me as I go into their homes and the truck is loaded, and there's all the other side of the brain stuff that you have to do from a business perspective. However, you get there, or I get there, and there's something that takes over.
Yeah.
And it's an energy, to your point, that I can't really express. And I say to my clients often, look, I know that you want me to list everything on a piece of paper that I'm going to bring to your job. You want to know which lamps, how much they cost, you want to know which accessory, you want to know all these details. But if that's what you have to know, I'm probably not your best designer, because I can't operate like that. My process is something takes over. I see things. It is just an energy that allows me to do what I do in their homes. And I imagine, I know it's like that in painting because I do paint. Is it that way in jewelry? Is it a similar
Yeah.
feeling?
Yeah, I mean, and I think just like everything else, there's certain certain parts of our lives that are really well served by the rational mind. If I'm
Sure.
there, so there are parts of jewelry making where if I'm making a bezel for a ring, I have to, measure it so that I'm, the math is required sometimes. But when I'm designing or when I'm picking a stone for a certain piece, or when I'm, there's when I'm looking at, like, I do a lot of casting out of nature. So I'll go and I'll take like a big cedar branch and I'll find the right part of that branch and I'll pull it off and I'll cast it and I'll make it into gold or silver, or so it's an exact replica of something from nature. And I do that across with seashells and with all kinds of things. And I've always said to people that I'm sort of collaborating behind the scenes with that original specimen, because one of the things I do is you can't just yank a branch from a tree and stick it on a hoop and put it in your ear. So I get quiet and I tap into this feeling I get around, well, where does this want to be cut off? And how is that going to, and it's a feeling. And I think that's what you're feeling when you're in a room and you're looking around, you're like, what does this need? It's a feeling. It can't come from your mind. And
sure.
Yeah. And you asked something a minute ago about, can that parlay into other parts of your life? And I think creativity is such a wonderful, when we have a healthy creative practice with whatever it is that inspires us, music, painting,
right.
Whatever, and it's a practice for a reason, because when we go back to it every day and we strengthen those muscles and we become stronger at creating and being beholden to all the ups and downs. Creativity has all kinds of, it's a journey for us. There's blocks and there's uncertainty and you don't know how it's going to end and all these things. But when we're in that, in a practice that way that we've really committed to, it does translate into to the rest of your life. So that let's say, for example, now you're in your quote unquote real life, and you've got a new job offer
right
in front of you. So your phone rang unexpectedly and somebody wants you to come and work for them. And it wasn't something you planned. And now you have to make a decision about, well, there's a pros and cons list, right? Well, I love this job. I wasn't totally happy there because of X, Y, Z. And now there's this job, but I maybe have to move to another town and you can, if you're just referencing your rational mind, you can get totally stuck. And you can actually just freeze, because the pro con thing can just go on indefinitely, because you can talk yourself into or out of anything if you're coming from that place in your mind. But if you're coming from creativity, if you've given yourself a creative practice and you've strengthened those muscles, because one of the things that creativity is gut instinct and intuition and knowings, those inner knowings. Because that's what we're talking about when you're in the room and you're trying to figure out what lamp and what you're tapping into your knowings that you strengthen because you're a creative person and have a creative practice. And that's something that we all have access to.
Sure.
But that we don't necessarily, and the reason I say we're glitching is because so many of us, because we've self-selected out of creativity because of all the reasons that we were talking about a minute ago, feel that we're not allowed to access that. And even our intuition. That includes, when you throw that out, you throw out intuition, gut instinct, and all that stuff. And so, I really feel like it can translate into your whole life. Yeah.
Yes. And I encourage my listeners who are focused on, on design in general. And, I get everything from, I'm just not as creative, or I tried it and it didn't work out, or they've taken a class of mine and they feel that maybe they didn't master that particular skill evidenced in their home. But what I say often, and I think that people often put this aside, and I know that I've experienced it. The reason I can decorate so easily is I've done it for 29 years every day. And because I've honed my practice. I practice it. I eat, love, pray it. And the same thing with my art. When I look at the beginning paintings, it's hilarious. And yet, because I keep pushing and I keep practicing. And so I say to my students who want to design their own spaces, you gotta practice. You really have to. You can't expect to take a class and then it all just magically falls into place. And if that's what you want, you're better served to hire a designer. But if you really want to learn how to confidently create, you do have to practice. And I think that's to your point. And you have to find a way to allow that energy to emerge. And I think that is so much of, maybe from what I understand, the foundation of your program, your premise, and that people don't allow that. It's an allowing. It's not just grabbing, it's an allowing, and then it's fostering it, right? Is that kind of what
Absolutely.
you're saying?
Yeah. I feel
So,
like it's and you can apply that to anything. You know, I have a 9-year-old son who's in soccer and he's really good. And so he's been sort of put on the special teams and
right,
he
right,
plays like 5 days a week and it's a
right.
lot, but he loves it. And one of his coaches was saying to him the other day, you know, listen, you're really good, but
Mm,
you can't, that doesn't count for anything at now anymore.
right,
Like now you have to work and you actually have to
right.
work harder than anybody else because there could be some kid down the street who doesn't have the natural skill that you have. And he's outside in his yard every day and he's kicking that ball and he's passing and he's learning how to, and he's
Sure.
practicing every single day and he's going to become a master and he can leave you in his dirt, in his dust if
Yes.
you're not careful. And I've heard that across, you know, the great masters, you know, you can think about
And yeah, musicians, anybody.
musicians, any in
Yeah.
any discipline, you can have a natural talent, and that's wonderful. It's a little bit of a head start or a hint or whatever you want to call it. But unless you commit to a practice, it's just going to become stagnant, and it isn't going to. It's like a plant that you didn't give any light or water to. And so, and the same is true for somebody who feels maybe a less connected to their. Because
Sure.
here's the thing: for that person who really wants to decorate
Hmm.
and who really wants to be able to do that, they're just like frustrated that they can't on the first day. That desire in them is their natural ability to decorate, saying,
Yes.
pay attention to me, like
Yes. Amen, sister.
practice me, do make mistakes, fail, mess up, do the like think
Sure.
and look at any of us in our high school yearbook photos. Did any of us look the
Right.
way we want to look today?
Right.
No.
Right. And it's also having patience with yourself. I could afford to go hire a designer, but it's the want. It's the I want to own it. I want the ownership of it. And that's what I'm trying to foster. Like if that's where you are, then I can help you develop your practice to get there. It isn't going to happen overnight. And we both have been down that road. And speaking of that, like, you know, a couple of things back to your bio. So I think these things might be interwoven, but I'm curious. So in your journey, you got the big house, the success, all the stuff, the trappings. You had this sort of successful jewelry business, and yet you said there were some very dark times, and that creativity walked beside you. Kind of share with us what that was all about. Like how'd you get that? How'd you get the big house and the trappings? And then you also said that there was something missing. So tell me a little more about that before we get into some other philosophy stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I came from a really it was a tough beginning for me. I was born into a family where there was a lot of tumult. There was alcoholism and violence, and I ended up on my own from a very young age.
Wow.
Uh, and even in those times, creativity was it was just always with me. I was just always had this desire and drive to create. I was always that person who was like, yeah, I could probably buy that, but no, I have to understand how it feels to make it. And so that
Mhm.
drive is always really strong within me. And then I moved across the country. I'm from the East Coast, and I moved to the West Coast, where I've settled and have lived for 20 years, and started a jewelry company out here. So I went to college out here and learned how to do jewelry, and went through, I guess, a pretty intense breakup in my mid 20s. I married very young the first time,
Mhm.
and that sort of threw me through a really, you know, I was alone out here on the West Coast. I was young. I didn't have any sort of safety net. I hadn't built anything yet. Um, and I was really, really on my own. And except for my creativity, that was the thing. That was
Wow.
always the one thing that's been with me. And so I went to college and I learned how to make jewelry. And, you know, my life has always been really, I've always been, I don't know what I believe, but I do feel like there's something looking out for me and kind of giving me
Mhm.
these beautiful opportunities because
Right.
I've always been really held by life. And, even though there've been dark times and I've lost everything, I'm not saying it's always been, always had, had stuff. I just mean that I've always been okay.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that's true for all of us if we really look
Right.
closely.
It's so true. Somehow we are okay.
Yeah, it's always okay. So, and then I built this. I couldn't stop thinking about the cedar tree. I just couldn't stop thinking about cedar. And it was like for 6 years, if you knew me, it was like I had this vision for this jewelry that I had to make out of, and all my teachers at school were like, well, you can't really, it doesn't work that way. You can't make molds of stuff like that. And it's too thin. And you can't, technically there were all these problems with how do you make, but it wouldn't leave me alone. It was kind of driving me insane.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I spent thousands of dollars probably of my savings over the years experimenting with different ways to bring this jewelry to life. And finally, I figured it out. Finally, I figured out this method for making this jewelry the way that my mind saw it, the way I kept seeing it in my meditations, the way that my heart was telling me could make it. And because it was so different from everything else that was on the market, it was just a huge hit. So wow. I was able to support my family for, a good 10 years doing this. And I exhausted myself because I was at a busy public market in Vancouver.
Sure.
And so when it was right around the time that my babies were really little. And so I was like, breastfeeding and taking people's visa cards and trying to, I was just doing too much, and it was too much. So, so then that I fell away from that, and then COVID hit, and then I went through a big divorce again about a year and a half ago with my kid's dad during the middle of COVID. And at the same time as I'd been diagnosed with a tumor and I needed urgent surgery to get it out. It was in my throat. It was a very intense time.
Yeah.
And
very dark.
very, very, very dark. And at the same time, there was a part of me that just kept feeling like, wow, when this is all over, you're going to have, there's something's being born inside of you, deep inside of you. And there's something, I could feel that there was something percolating and happening inside of me. And so I just kept walking through the fire, and sure enough, one day in the spring of last year, about 10 months ago, I was walking my dog early in the morning, and I was like, okay, here, I've walked through the fire. Here it is. And I was walking the dog early in the morning, and I this sounds a little crazy, but I literally heard a voice say,
I believe in this.
Okay.
It can be very woo. And I think that creatives can allow that and tap into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I can, but sometimes I wonder who am I talking to? Can I say that?
That's that rational brain.
Thank you. You're right. So I heard this voice, and I laughed, and I sort of whipped around, and I was like, what? Because the voice said, it's time for you to start a podcast, and your first guest will be so-and-so. And the reason I laughed is because there was nowhere in my being that ever consciously thought of doing this, anything like that.
Right.
It's not like I ever thought, I have a good voice, or I'm great at conversations, or I know how to interview, nothing, never, anywhere. Right. And so I laughed because it was so literally out of left field. It had nothing to do with anything I was doing. And at the same time, I knew there was that knowing that you have. It's the same knowing when you're like, yeah, that lamp fits there on that. You put it down and it makes that sound. You know that sound it makes when you put it down? You're like, it's like, that's in its place.
That's it. Yep.
That's the feeling I had when I knew about the podcast. So I came home and I was like, wow, what? And so I just started doing it. And I reached out to that person who came with that message. It said, you're going to talk to this person. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to her right away, and she said, yes.
Wow.
Right away. But then I had to figure out what the podcast was going to be about, because I actually still had no idea. And so I was really reflecting on that. And that was where all that work came through, around realizing that, creativity has been my constant companion, and the realization that it's our disconnect from creativity that's causing us to glitch and causing so many people to be in so much pain. And that's sort of how the light and the dark all kind of came together. Yeah.
Yes. So we've kind of hit on this, but I want to dive just a little bit deeper. So I have so many students and people who come to me that say, well, I'm just not creative, or I'm just a little bit creative, or they'll compare themselves. I know as artists, we tend to go down that rabbit hole, and it gets us nowhere but down the rabbit hole. But does creativity come easier to some? And if someone believes they don't really have creativity, how do they go there? How do they tap in a little bit and little by little? I mean, we've talked about practice, but what's the steps? What's the first step? What can they do when they feel this way?
I think the very, very first thing to do is notice that if you notice that you feel this way, you're being tapped. Creativity is
Mm-hmm.
calling you. So, first of all, you're not completely disconnected from it because you have this desire. And desire is one of the most important, if not the most important step
Yes.
in creativity. So, you've got the desire, you're in, baby. Like that's the first step. I think the second thing that can be really, really helpful is, and maybe people won't like this because they're going to want like an action step, but is to notice the things that you notice and notice the things that you like and want and are drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
And because those are all little nudges, like what is it you always want to buy? What store do you always want to go to? What activity do you always want to do? What do you, if you had an hour in front of you, what would you do with it? Because there's clues in the desires in those questions too that can lead you down your path. And I think that
Sure.
that's a really important thing. You know, there may be somebody who's like, I always want to buy watercolor paints, or I always want to buy fabric, or I always want to
Yeah.
go do that. Like give yourself some permission to go and do that. And
Yeah.
then I think for a little while, not forever, because I don't feel like you should have to stick to something for the sake of it, but do it for a little while. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're really noticing that you're drawn to all these fabrics and doing things, do it, and then make a little find a way to make a practice around that.
Mm-hmm.
How can you weave something like for 10 minutes a day? Because I really feel like the practice part is so important for cultivating anything. So how can you build yourself some sort of practice that's really just 10 minutes a day? Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
you're going to sketch a room, or you're going to sketch a layout of something, or but just get the journal then and get
Right.
yourself a nice pencil
Right.
and put it in the same place on
Right.
your desk, and just, oh, it's 9 o'clock or it's 10:30 or
Right.
whatever time you've set aside, and really commit to that. Because I think even though it's creativity and it's like this kind of flowy, ethereal, like magical energy thing that we're talking about, it does require a certain amount of practice and a practicality and a commitment if you're going to
Sure.
build it, you know. And I had a guest on my own
Sure.
show a little while ago she said it's like a sit-up. A sit-up is not going to chase you down the street, you know. And
Yes.
it's true, like creativity, because it's so gentle. Creativity is not going to chase you down the street. It will wait for you to be
Yes.
ready. But
Yes.
so some of those things can be a way to, you know. And then you start to get into some of the territory around, well, what happens when I have a creative block? Oh, well, good. Then
Mm.
it's telling you to rest. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
creative blocks. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with
Yeah.
you, or you've hit the end of your talent, or any of those things. Just
Right.
so then you start to get into some of the sort of the rocky parts of the territory where you just have to kind of learn how to ride those parts of it out.
How to maneuver. And I know in the design business, for me, it rarely comes in the form of blocks, but it comes in the form of challenges, like unsurmountable feeling challenges. And they are, I don't know what to put on that wall. I'm not sure, like, this is a tricky little space. I was recently working on a home, and I had it's a male's home, and he's a single guy. And there's this really kind of sexy master bathroom. And I had already selected the perfect artwork for this. And it was a figurative painting, and it was tall and narrow. The colors were great, like it was going to work. And I kept not finishing that bathroom. And I kept thinking, why? And I was struggling a lot with, and it was just a few pieces. It was not complicated. It was a piece of art, a stool, and a floor lamp. Sounds crazy, but that's like what ended up in that space. But I was not blocked. I was challenged because I didn't think my client was going to love the painting. So I kept not installing it, not installing. I would go over here and I'd work over there, and I'd go over here and I'd work over there, but I was not installing the bathroom. And so I kind of had to go through a workout. And that's sort of what I call it when I get stumped in the design process. I go through a workout, and the workout means I might need to talk about it with a fellow designer. I might need to seek another opinion. You have to be careful because too many cooks in the kitchen can spoil the design. But I have some trusted people that work on my team. So I wanted to talk through it. I literally am more of a surprise element designer. Like sometimes if you show a client a painting, they might not can envision it the way you can. So it's nixed from the beginning. But when I get to that blocky challenge stage, it's a workout for me. It's not, it goes from being the yoga practice to I'm doing a full-on workout today. And that tends to get me through it. And I say this just because we're creatives talking, but also because my listener, when they get to that block stage, everybody finds their own process for how to get out of it. And after 29 years of decorating, I still go there. I still doubt. I still worry. I still wonder. It's like Barbara Streisand said once, I still get nervous right before every performance. I do too. Do you?
Absolutely. And listen, I think these are all just because you get really good at being a creator or you master your craft doesn't mean you're not a human anymore.
Right. Right. And it does creep in, and block creeps in, and all sorts of things.
And you know what? They don't just creep in. They're a fundamental, important part of the creative process.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
So
and
true.
you're intuitively, like you said, after 29 years, you intuitively know what to do when you get that, what do I do here? You take a step back, you work on all the other things.
Right.
You ask for other insight. You didn't lock yourself in that bathroom and say, I'm not leaving this room until it's figured out. I mean, where's that going to get you?
Right.
You understand that spaciousness is required around those times. And you've learned how to dance around it.
Sure.
And keep the energy flowing.
Yes. And I'd say self-doubt sometimes is, again, even after 29 years, there are some self-doubt moments still, and probably always will be. And I know that most creatives do suffer from this. And I think I hear you loud and clear. That's not like, that's still keep going. Like, don't let that stop you.
Like, let's question why we think that self-doubt is, okay, there's self-doubt from like, depending who in you is talking. Is it your inner critic and your judge who's like trying to be mean to you and dismiss you and make you feel small? Okay. Yeah. That stuff you can just park. You can just send those people off to the side and they don't need to be in your brain. But if it's uncertainty about the work that you're doing or the line that you put on the canvas or the placement of that object or whatever it is, I actually feel like that is growth. Because if you stop, do you actually want to be in the next 29 years of your career knowing everything is right all the time? Like, oh, that goes there, that goes here, that goes there. That is so boring.
Right.
You're not creating anymore. You're just putting stuff places.
Correct. I'm showing up. And it becomes a job at that point.
Right. So that uncertainty, if you can realize it, so make sure it's not the uncertainty of the in your brain, because that person can just go away. But if it's the one who's like, well, what about if, are you sure that doesn't go there? Like if it's that voice, that's creativity talking to you.
It is.
That's inviting you to play and try something new and discover and learn. You're growing. If you've got that uncertainty and you're willing to let yourself be in it, you can be 100% guaranteed that you're actually growing.
Yes. And I think that if I've learned anything in my design practice that is paramount, it's being a risk taker. And, I guess it was Pam Bates was on your episode. I loved it when she said bold marks.
Oh,
I know. And you were cringing. I loved it. It was so great.
Yeah.
But I've incorporated that into my art practice often. And I've made some messed up bold marks, but who cares? But I've almost intuitively used bold marks, taken great big risk in my design work. I guess I'm more comfortable in that medium. And, that's how the bathroom turned out. I hung the picture. I put the lamp in place. I put the bench out, put a throw on it, lit a candle, showed this man the bathroom, and he loved it. You know, they don't all work out like that, but it was a risk. And I think sometimes it's easy to shy away a little bit from the risk. But sometimes when you make that bold mark, and I say this to the listener, especially sometimes when you think that big object is going to be too big or whatever, try it anyway, especially if it warms your heart.
And, absolutely.
Right.
Oh yeah. I can't, because that's the thing, you know, when you're taking in a room or you're taking in a piece of art or a piece of writing or whatever it is, it's actually the things that are bold and noticeable that catch you. That's that reaction, that feeling that, oh,
yes,
that's, and I'm not saying, you know, do things to be reactionary, but when Pam was talking about that, you know, she was actually talking about the painting behind me. She said, what would happen if you took a big black the biggest paintbrush you had? And I was like, this beautiful thing, I can't, no.
Right.
But when you look at her work, it's all freedom. She's just always doing that. And the reason people respond to it is that you're energetically responding to the freedom that she's expressing in her work. And it's the same thing when you walk into a room, when somebody has had the bravery to just put the painting up, and there's a freedom you're able to experience because the designer made choices that allowed you a bigger space to be free in, or a bigger thing to be free looking at.
Of course. Very well said. Very well said. So I want to transition into your art, because I got to first talk about these adorable, precious birds that you're making. Like I love to see them. And so what inspired that, for starters? And tell me a little bit about them.
Well, so actually part of my darkness was that I didn't let myself, even though I went to, I don't know if you all, or maybe your listeners remember the show Fame from when we were much younger.
Oh yeah.
So I went to a high school that was like that. You had to audition to get in.
Lucky you.
I was very lucky. And I was in the visual arts program. And, you know, when you're in your early, you know, after I left school and you're in your early 20s, you don't know what's not possible and what is possible. And I went to this gallery one day all wide-eyed, and I was like, come and take my work and have a show. And they were like, oh, honey, that's not how galleries work. And I was like, what? I didn't know that you had to, like, I didn't know. It was like, I thought you just go and show your nice stuff and they put it on the wall. I was young. But then I was also a little bit cheeky, and I said, well, I'm here. Why don't you just look at my portfolio? And they said, okay, fine, you're here. So they were like, oh, actually, yeah, we'd love to represent you right there on the spot. Aww. Let's do a thing, and we'll do they were talking about the media and the wine and cheese. And I was 22, I think. I was really young. And I left there, and it was in Canada. I don't know. I always forget the degrees in the United States, but it was minus 35 degrees, which is really, really cold. Something you can Google it and find out. It's very, your skin freezes at that. Yeah. So I'm at the bus stop with my paintings and my portfolio. I'll never forget this moment. I just was overcome with this terror that I wouldn't be able to produce paintings on demand, because I thought that was what was going to happen. The story I had was I was going to have to, so I didn't paint for 25 years after that. I never did the show.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I shoved it all deep down. I did the jewelry business. I kind of hid a little bit behind the jewelry for a long time. And part of that opening for me over the last couple of years with COVID and with my own, journey that I was walking through, I realized that I had to let myself paint again. And so I did. And it was like this fire hose of, work that came out of me and so, the abstract stuff behind me and faces and birds and all these things. And the birds came along because I was actually looking for a way to, I've put my entire heart and soul into creating the Creative Genius podcast, because it's like it's what I'm here to do. And I'm a single mom and I'm an artist, and it doesn't pay to have a podcast. Right. So I was like, well, what can I do? I do ask for people to support the podcast through the Patreon, which is great. Right. And people want to do that, and that's fine. But I also kind of am a very reciprocal person. And so I wanted to create something where it was like, okay, well, let me give you this and then you can give me that. So the birds were kind of a comfortable way for me to do that. And so they're also part of my everyday practice. I love watercolors, and
so beautiful.
I don't have time to get out to the studio every day to work on these big 5-foot canvases. Right. And so I can sit and do these little 5-inch by 5-inch watercolors and play with
Right.
color and be with my art and be with the
Right.
kids, like you said, in the hustle and bustle of your house. And
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of what they are.
And I love that they're gratitude birds and they each have a superpower. Am I saying that
Oh
right? I
yeah.
just
So
think that is so clever, Kate.
oh, well, they kind of did that themselves. So I like to pull, I have these little cards where I'll just pull and it's like a
Yeah.
word for the day, like
Right.
acceptance or so I'm often pulling words for different scenarios. My kids have a fight. I'm like, let's go pull a word.
Right.
It's kind of my go-to.
Great.
And so
Cool.
I thought, what would it be like if these birds were something you could do to send to a friend?
Mhm.
Like I think as grown-ups, we sort of forget the magic of passing notes to each other in class or sending each other,
True.
doing little
Now
things
that we can text, we don't
we don't,
actually
yeah.
make and do.
Exactly. And so I thought, what would it be like if I could so name them? So I've got, I don't know if these guys are all named yet. No. So but so it would be like Emily the Brave, and then her superpower would be perseverance.
Right.
And so they
Love
kind
it.
of like that. And then people write in and the most amazing thing that happens is that I get to read these love notes that people are sending to
Oh,
their people. And I'm in tears
right.
writing these on,
Oh, it's
I'm
so
on the
great.
back of the paintings.
It's so great.
Yeah, moms to their daughters and friends to friends who are
Oh,
going through things, and then I get to go to the mailbox and send them off, and then they fly all over the place.
it's magical.
It
That
is
is magical.
it is.
So, since we're talking about specific art, I want to kind of dive into because homeowners don't always, and people that are decorating their own homes, they don't always know what art to collect. They don't know, especially if they're just diving into this. So the first thing that happens is they think, oh gosh, original art, I can't afford that. And then they think, well, does everything have to be original? And how do I incorporate the things I already have with now this beautiful art? How do you guide someone to start investing, whatever level, into being surrounded by beautiful art?
I love this question. Well, there's so many things I want to say. First of all, as an artist, and obviously I'm surrounded by all my friends and extended network are people. Lots of them are creatives, and so there's been a lot of trading. My house is
Right.
filled with things that are. I don't think I really eat off of a dish or drink out of a cup that wasn't handmade. Like
Right.
it's everywhere.
Right.
Um, and there's an energy that comes with having handmade things around you that is second to none. If
True.
you're going to spend even $30 on something, make it handmade, because you can always, and so this is the second thing I want to say, you can always find there's either, an emerging artist or the art, this whole thing about art being not affordable or handmade things being, it's not true. It's really not true.
And I want people to know that because there's so much art being made today. And I was meeting with a client yesterday and I said, I want to, she's like, what is the art going to be like in my home? And I said, well, I'm going to encourage you in this home to surround yourself with some original pieces. Oh gosh, we can't afford. And I'm like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's as important as the sofa. It is.
It
What you
is.
look at every day is important. Now, some people are definitely on limited budgets. Most people are on limited budgets. I get it. But you can source art from Instagram, from Etsy, from art festivals and fairs, all of these things. And you can spend $20 on a piece of art and you can love it with your whole heart. And I don't think I'm off base here, right,
Oh,
Kate? I mean, you sell your art, so
yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
and
you're nailing it. I think you're absolutely nailing it. I think it's one of these limiting beliefs we have around, because the truth of the matter is when you have original art in your home feels better.
it
Your
does.
home comes to life in a way that no store-bought manufactured thing could ever give you. And I think there's actually, ironically, some part of us that wants to sort of, we feel like we're not good enough for that kind of level of living, right? Like
Yes.
everybody deserves real art. Everybody should have that something in their home that makes them, and actually more than one thing, and everything in their home should make you feel the way you want to feel. It should resonate with your being. It should make you feel aspirational. There should be a painting in your bathroom that you walk in and it makes you feel something.
Sure.
And you can't get that in in mass produced things.
I think so too. And you know, I think that most or a lot of people that aren't in the art community. And sometimes when I'm in something, I just assume everyone knows what I know about design or everyone knows what I know about art or whatever. But, you know, if you are starting a collection, what you'll find, I think, is decorative mass produced art will suddenly look displaced among the art you truly love. That does not mean, however, that you cannot purchase a print. A print is it's a replica of an original piece. And I just encourage people to start somewhere with things that they love. And whether it's art or it's some sculpture or it's something interesting that caught your eye, and maybe it is a piece that can hang, but it's not necessarily a canvas, it's some object. And I can't say enough about that. But what do you say to someone who has a lot of decorative art and they, you know, can they work with it? Can they decorate with it?
I mean, of course. I mean, of course you can. It all comes down to, you know, what's the feeling you want to have in your space. If it really is simply just, you know, the way something looks, sure, you can make anything look pretty.
Yes.
But if you want to feel something, if you want to bring, which I think as a designer, you probably I don't know because I'm not a designer, but I feel like one of your intentions is to make a room feel alive, right? Like
For sure.
Yeah. And so
feeling is the key word.
Feeling is the most important thing. Yeah. And so yes, you can decorate with, and maybe even if you're starting out a collection, you don't have to throw everything away, but you can start to incorporate original pieces with what you already have. And I think what you'll find is that for that person, what they'll find is as soon as you have one sort of original piece, like you just said, the difference is night and day, and there'll be this love affair that will grow. And as that love affair is starting, one thing I wanted to say is that a lot of artists will do prints of, even on canvases, you can get really high quality prints of, you know, maybe you can't afford $10,000 to buy the original of the piece that's behind me, but maybe you can afford $1,200 to buy the print of it. And then a lot of us will do a limited run. So I might do a limited run of where I say, I'm only ever going to do 5 prints of this piece behind me at that size. And then I'll embellish, you know, I'll by hand with paint, I'll go in and I'll take a little corner and I'll make it original. So in a way it has original elements to it. So there's a way of kind of, and those are less expensive than buying the whole thing as the original.
Right. And
that's another option that you can kind of weave your way into this thing slowly and, you know, dip your toe in slowly. And also just look on Instagram. You know, you can look for tags like emerging artist, or I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but things like that. And or new artists.
And Instagram does such a good job of once you like a couple of those, and you're going to get flooded. So
you're going to see it.
The algorithm will take over.
Yeah. But I personally know so many incredible artists and so many sources where you could just get incredible just entry into becoming an art collector and certainly not break your bank. I mean, you get what you pay for sure. You have to invest. It's an investment.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like you're buying museum pieces on your first day as a collector.
Right. For sure. So let's circle back around to this deep, rich philosophy of yours. This, I guess I call it your driving force, this thing that keeps you doing a podcast, really kind of keeps you engaged in the creative world. So you kind of posed this to me. Why is learning to flex our creative muscle so important? And I want to get that in because I want to make sure that, to me, Kate, you embody the real meaning of creativity. And I just want you to speak a little more about like what it is, why it's important to learn to create that or to flex that creative muscle.
When you are only using a part of what you're made of, you're very limited. And what we've done to ourselves is evolve to a place where we are living our entire lives mostly from our rational mind.
Mm.
And, it's been thousands of years in the making. There's a million reasons why. We can't cover it in today's show, but we've evolved to a place where we're really scared of the other side, right? Which I call creativity, intuition, gut instinct. We've really loved all that stuff. It's all kind of been dismissed in a mass culture sort of way. But the reality is that if I always think of the image of a sea turtle with one flipper. And if you've only got one flipper, you're going to be swimming in a circle. Right. And because we're operating our entire world, our family systems, our communities, our education systems, our everything is really weighted towards this rational mind as the thing that drives all of its decisions. And it's not working because it doesn't work. So if you're not using the whole thing, it can't function the way it's supposed to. So I really feel like what we're all, and COVID, I feel like did such a beautiful thing of stopping us so that we had to face it. I feel like there's an invitation for us to come back to using our whole selves. And creativity is a beautiful place to practice that in a safe container. You don't have to go out in the world and redo everything, but you can come back. Even if you're not a quote unquote artist, you can get yourself a little sketchbook and a pen, even if you just do those two things. And you can experiment with what is it like to draw something and allow yourself to not judge yourself. And what does that feel like? And, or if you are judging yourself when you're doing that, why are you judging yourself? And is it necessary? And how can you, or put a bunch of color on your watercolor pad and not know where it's going to take you. And then now all of a sudden you're practicing being okay with uncertainty. And all of these things, when they translate into our whole life, now you can start to be able to say to yourself when you're at the store and you're saying, well, I don't know which microwave to buy. Our microwave just broke and we need a new one. I don't know. Now you actually now can tap into this gut feeling because you've been practicing it at home in this tiny little space.
Right.
And I really feel like, I'll go back to saying, I feel like we're glitching. And the glitch is just that we're not fully online. We're only using our rational minds. And we know because it's in us that something's off about that. And so we do have this instinct that, and it's everywhere. And it used to make me so sad when I used to see people, and we've talked about this moment so many times, where is that wish of, I wish I could be, and there's a sadness there. And the sadness is just this disconnection from not something outside of you that you have to go get, that you're missing, that you didn't get given. It's just a part of yourself that you forgot to look at. And it's so important that we wake that up.
So beautiful. That's beautiful. So I have a signature question or two that I typically ask, and it is, if you had a hashtag on your tombstone, what would it say and why? This is kind of like your billboard question.
Enjoy yourself.
I love it. And it's so true.
It's what we're here to do. All of that, the creative intelligence that's inside of you, whether you're designing a room or figuring out how to care for a loved one when they're not well, because that's creativity too.
Sure.
Or trying to figure out a way through a difficult conversation at work, because that's creativity too. Or, what school to go to, or what job to take, or what relationship to start or leave, or what color to use on your canvas. It's all a journey that wants to take you to a place where you're enjoying yourself. The whole thing is just about enjoying that you're alive and you get to create moments and moments after moments after moments after moments. And the whole point is to enjoy yourself.
Kate, I feel like you are such a dose of sun and sunshine. And like, I feel like I'm listening to a storyteller, and it's beautiful. And your words are just so inspirational to me. I could do this all day. I really could. and I won't, but I could. And it just is uplifting. And I can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing these moments of your heart, but why creativity matters and why living beautifully does matter. I mean, you've said that. You've spent an hour telling us how important it is. And I've always believed it. I believe it more than ever just after our chat. So I know a lot of our listeners are going to want to follow you and tap into your energy. So tell everybody how they can find you and the best places to do that and all those things.
Okay. So my website is kateshepardcreative.com, and it's SHEPHERD. And from there, you'll be able to find the podcast, which is on all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those ones. And that's the Creative Genius Podcast with Kate Shepard. And if you're interested in seeing my jewelry, it's lovemorningmoon.com. And I don't know if you're going to have show notes or not, but I made a little coupon code for your listeners.
Oh,
so
great.
Yes, there's a little, so you can, it's BOSS.
Okay, great.
So just use the coupon code BOSS in the checkout of any of my websites. And, but do, if you do go out and listen to this, to the show, please let me know how it lands for you, because it's a new show. It is like already doing.
I think we're about the same age in our show.
Oh,
and yeah, I think I'm into maybe by the time this airs, I think we'll be at 41 episodes, something like that.
I'm 11. I'm brand new.
Oh, okay. So you're even newer. And, people don't really know this about podcasts, but it is a lot of energy, and you really have to actually like it, and you have to, because it takes a lot. And in terms of the being up and the topics and the interviews and all the stuff. And I've kind of found a new home. It's sort of a new form of creativity for me. And it's getting easier and easier, probably because I'm getting a little more accustomed to the whole thing. But in any event, it's so true, guys that are listening. Like, we need your support. Podcast does not pay big bucks or any bucks, for that matter. And so we need you, and it costs to produce them. And so we need you to share it with friends. So I'll be appearing on Kate's show pretty soon. And it's kind of like a world. And the great thing about a podcast is you can be riding down the road listening to one. You can be on the treadmill, you can be walking, you can be doing anything. And, people say that, how can you do a podcast on something so visual? Well, it's not that hard. It's still the same principles and philosophies that many of which we talked about today. So again, Kate, I'll wind down. And I thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to a great friendship in the future. Wow. I hope you are as moved and touched by my chat with Kate. It's so enlightening and so inspiring. Some of my takeaways are that we all have creativity. Yes, even you, all of you. We all have it. And it's ours to tap into. I also garnered from Kate that developing a practice centered around creativity is a good thing. In other words, if you practice, you can develop your creativity. And I quite agree with her. So thank you so much for listening. And please take a second to rate, review, and follow. We want to hear from you. We've just started with interviews, and I want to know how you're feeling about them. Let us know, and we're eager to hear. And you probably know what I'm going to say next. Don't wait. Today is a great day to decorate. Bye for now.